Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. This week, we are discussing the Dingman brothers, and if you're familiar with the Menendez brothers case, this one is eerily similar. This case came from fellow viewer Purple Gemini, so thank you in advance. As always, I invite you to join me as we remember Vance and Eve Dingman. I tried to track down as much as I could about the Dingman family in general, but there wasn't a lot to go on, so I'm going to provide what I could find. Eve Dingman was born on January 18, 1958 in Kew Gardens, New York. She served in the United States Air Force for 6 years at the rank of Staff Sergeant as a materials control specialist. She was well educated and active in her church as a communicant. Until her death, Eve worked as a customer service representative for Kuhn & Felt Company in Northampton, New Hampshire. She and her husband Vance settled in a quaint home on 8 Dover Road in Rochester, New Hampshire, where they raised 2 sons. Vance Dingman was born on March 16, 1955 in Glen Falls, New York. He also served in the Air Force as a technical sergeant. Once out of the military, Vance made a living as an electrician. The Dingman family were described as your normal suburban family. Robert Dingman was 17 and Jeffrey was 14. They weren't necessarily troubled, but your average teenagers. They didn't always make the best grades, but seemed to stay out of trouble. Eve and Vance placed curfews and rules to ensure their boys had a solid upbringing, or so they thought. The Dingman brothers wanted more freedom. They couldn't stand the strict stipulations set in place by their parents. Robert in particular felt restricted. He was grounded for bad grades, and his parents refused to let him buy a cell phone with his own money. Jeffrey had received word that he might fail the 8th grade, and punishment waited for him as well. Rather than just continue to live this way, the brothers formulated a plan to handle their parents permanently. On February 9, 1996, Robert and Jeffrey retrieved Vance's .22 caliber pistol from his locked cabinet. They turned the radio up loud and waited for Vance to return home from work. When Vance walked through the door, they ambushed him. Jeffrey shot his father first before his brother Robert took the gun for his turn. He shot Vance multiple times before standing over him. He taunted him stating, quote, "How about another one," end quote, before shooting him for a final time. Shortly after, Eve arrived home. The radio was blaring, so Eve yelled out to her sons to turn it down. However, instead of her request being carried out, she was met with her sons and a gun. Eve was shot 2 or 3 times by Jeffrey before Robert once again came in to finish the job. Robert fired more shots at her, cursing at her, before giving her one final shot to the head. With their parents gone, the brothers worked quickly to not only hide their bodies, but clean up their blood-spattered home. They wrapped both Vance and Eve in garbage bags before finding hiding places within the home. Vance was left in the attic, while Eve was left in the basement. Once they were finished, the night was still fairly young, so Jeffrey grabbed a snack and headed outside to play basketball with a friend, while Robert went over to his girlfriend's house. Robert and Jeffrey spent the entire weekend partying and living life how they wanted to. Anytime their parents were brought up by friends, they would just say their parents took a vacation and would return soon. When Monday rolled around, the boys both showed up to school, just business as normal, in an attempt to keep up appearances that all was well. However, unbeknownst to them, this would not be enough. When Eve did not show up for work, coworkers became concerned with her absence. It was unlike her to shrug responsibilities. If she planned on being out for the day, she would have at least phoned her boss. Police were called and asked to perform a welfare check, which they did. They went to the home where they got no answer. So in an attempt to get more information, they went to Spalding High School to speak with Robert, their oldest son. When questioned, Robert explained he didn't know where his parents were, and claimed he didn't know what the problem was since he was old enough to care for his brother while they were away. His response seemed odd, so police decided to stop by the Dingman home later in the day to speak to Jeffrey as well. Once at the home, Jeffrey played off the same story as Robert. Neither of them had any idea where their parents had gone. Police asked if they could take a look around the house, to which the boys allowed. Jeffrey and Robert waited patiently in the kitchen while police looked for anything that could explain what was going on. 2 detectives made their way to the attic where they found garbage bags. They called down asking what the bags were. Robert stated he had no idea what they were, talking about it in a very nonchalant tone. So naturally, the bags were opened, and after 3 days, the body of Vance Dingman was recovered. Both of the boys were placed in custody, while a continued search of the house also turned up Eve's body. Forensics found fingerprints on both garbage bags, which were a match to Robert Dingman. Both of the boys were questioned, but Jeffrey seemed to be more open to discussion. He initially explained to police he wasn't involved with the murders, but when police weren't buying the story, he switched it up. Robert made him shoot their parents. When asked why they would want their parents gone, Jeffrey stated they just wanted more freedom and money. Jeffrey recalled how brutal their parents could be with them, painting a picture of what seemed to be a very unhappy home, where the boys were often yelled at and hit. The night before the murders, Robert came to Jeffrey with a plan. He explained that Jeffrey could shoot their father and he wanted to handle their mother. He wanted Jeffrey's help because without their parents in the way, they would be free to do whatever, whenever. And plus, they would inherit any money left behind. It was discovered the Dingmans did draw up wills, leaving a little over $200,000 to their children. Since Jeffrey was willing to work with investigators, they intended to work out a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against his brother. If Jeffrey pled guilty to second-degree murder, prosecutors would propose a sentence of 30 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole, to which Jeffrey accepted. Jeffrey was the prosecution's principal witness, despite the defense arguing he was unreliable due to his original conflicting stories. Besides Jeffrey, Robert's friends and girlfriend from school were interviewed regarding his behavior prior to the murders. Allegedly, Robert always talked about wanting to be in a gang, which many attributed to his interest in rap music. He was said to always talk bad about his parents and even brag to friends that he planned to kill them. He was heard saying, quote, "Jail is life. I could kill my parents, take some money, go to jail, have 3 squares a day, lift weights, and play basketball." End quote. 2 days before the murders, Robert asked his girlfriend if she would love him if he killed someone. Jeffrey's testimony focused on their resentment due to strict parental control. He explained that he and Robert both shot each parent, but Robert was the true mastermind. The prosecution painted a picture of a vulnerable kid who just wanted to help out his older brother, with Robert persuading him to do his bidding. Family members were also questioned on the allegations made by the boys, where they denied any cruel and unusual punishments. In fact, they explained how the boys meant everything to their parents, and they went out of their way to ensure their happiness. The defense attempted to pin the blame on Jeffrey, claiming his poor performance in school would result in punishment. They explained Robert's only crime was helping clean up the murders and failing to notify the police. Robert's trial lasted for 2 weeks. On May 29, 1997, the jury reached a verdict. After more than 4 days of deliberations, Robert Dingman was found guilty on 2 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. Robert was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and an additional 7.5 to 15 years for his conspiracy charge. Jeffrey was given the 30 years to life with the possibility of parole. While in prison, Jeffrey earned his high school equivalency degree. In March of 2014, at the age of 32, Jeffrey Dingman was paroled from prison to a halfway house where he quickly found work at a steel mill. Jeffrey was released on the conditions that he would be on lifetime parole and he needed to take professional courses to help learn basic skills that he failed to develop after being in prison during his adolescence. On December 5, 2014, Jeffrey had a parole hearing where he was released from the halfway house. His maternal aunt, Elizabeth Landry, stood up for Jeffrey and expressed how she had forgiven him from the bottom of her heart and wanted to help him get his life back on track. Jeffrey moved in with his aunt, who helped him with the reintegration process back into society. Unlike his aunt, many other family members felt differently about his release, with some believing he was just as guilty as Robert and shouldn't be free. But Jeffrey continues to express remorse for his actions. His lawyer upon his release stated, quote, "He thinks about it every day and has every day since it happened. He's racked with guilt," end quote. Unlike his brother, Robert didn't get any breaks until 2012, when the U.S. Supreme Court found it unconstitutional to sentence juvenile offenders to mandatory life imprisonment without parole. Robert was given a resentencing trial in 2018 due to this. The prosecution sought 2 consecutive 25 years to life sentences due to the severity and predetermination of his crimes. During his second trial, the prosecutors provided evidence at the trial to show that Robert taunted his parents and fired the fatal shots. Near the end of his 2018 trial, Robert shared a written response to the court to express his thoughts. He stated, quote, "I'll never be able to forget what I've done. It's too much of who I am. I live my life constantly trying to make amends for what I did at 17. I do understand that my actions aren't weighed on a scale, and there's no amount of right that'll ever atone for the wrong I've done. Please believe how sorry I am for the loss and destruction that my actions and decisions have caused, and how much I wish I had been a stronger and better person to have made the right decisions instead of the wrong one that I did." End quote. At his second sentencing, the judge attempted to balance the premeditation of his crime and the suffering caused by the murders against his current mindset while incarcerated. The judge ruled that his young age at the time of the crimes and his behavior throughout his time in prison showed he had the capacity to reform. Much like in Jeffrey's case, his Aunt Elizabeth also forgave him and pled for mercy and a possible early release. With all of these different factors, a verdict was delivered in which the judge felt was a balanced sentence. In lieu of life in prison, Robert was given 2 20-year terms. Robert's lawyer attempted to appeal this decision, claiming this new sentence was just a de facto life sentence without parole, and he would be deprived of a realistic opportunity to build a meaningful life post-prison. However, this appeal did not go through, with the defense using the severity of the crimes to justify the sentence. Currently, Robert Dingman is still in prison and will not be eligible for parole until 2036, at the age of 57. Eve and Vance Dingman were buried together in Warrensburg Cemetery in Warrensburg, New York. They were both 40 years old. Thank you again to Purple Gemini for suggesting this case. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so leave your comments down below and we can chat about it. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving it a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more. And lastly, if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. Thank you again, my friends, for listening and continuing to support our community. You all are the best, and I hope you have a great week ahead of you. But for now, I will see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Bye, friends.